Hello, and thank you for joining us. I'm Viki Young, and I'm going to give you a little short music history lesson called The Beginnings of Musical Notation. As a music teacher and a piano teacher, I've often been asked by my students, why do we have to learn all these Italian words? If you're supposed to play softly, why doesn't it just say soft? Why does it have to say piano? If the music's slow, why does it say largo? It could just say slow. And so, and etc. And I tell them, well, Italian's the musical language, and that all musicians, no matter what language they speak, have to learn these words, so when they get the music, they will understand the directions. Well, of course, that doesn't really go very far. So I have to then tell them why musical notation came about the way it did. So we have to go back to the year about 900 in Italy. That time period, very few people could read and write besides priests. The monks in the monasteries could not read or write. The common man could not read or write. Well, I should say common people, because they were women too. The priests had all come from either the nobility or the upper class and had indeed been educated, but the monks were many times peasants or soldiers, people of that nature. They had had no training. They could not even write their names, most of them, or even sign a name. They made an X. So around that time, they were all being taught the Bible and the church services, which were in Latin, which was a foreign language to them. And in order to learn them, they were taught to sing them, because when you sing something, it's easier to remember. And if you don't believe me, try reciting the alphabet without singing the alphabet song. That's how we all learned it. Now, around the year 1000, it came to the attention of the head of the church, who was in Rome, that some of the smaller churches weren't doing the Mass correctly. So he sent out groups of priests to these churches to check up on them. These people became known as the Inquisitors. When they went to these churches, they would often hear the Mass being sung with the correct words but the wrong music. And that meant they weren't doing it the way it was done in Rome. So did that make these priests heretics? Did that make these monks, were they all now going to go to hell? Were they all going to be excommunicated? Or was it just the fact that because when you learn something by oral tradition, every time you do it, there's a tendency to want to embellish it, to add a little bit more to the music, to sometimes change the music altogether? Now, around this same time, there were a group of monks who were all mathematicians. They were also sort of in trouble with the church because the church priests did not understand mathematics. So most of them were doing their work actually in prison, which is kind of sad. There were many of them, but the one we remember was a man named Guido, and he was from the town of Arezzo. And around the year 1000, he found a motet, which is a religious song, where every line began one scale tone above the previous one. He took the first syllable from each line, which was ut, re, mi, fa, so, la, si, ut. We still use them as do, re, mi, fa, so, la, ti, do. So we've just changed that. And then he said, well, we don't have a lot of vellum, which is what they used to draw on. And most of these monks can't draw anyway. They're never going to own a piece of vellum, but they all have one of these. It's called their hand. So he put those syllables on their hand because he knew that when you touch something and say it and look at it, you are reinforcing your learning. So he taught this to the priests, who then taught it to the monks. And we call this the Guidonian hand. Now, he also thought about how are we going to put this on paper, or on vellum actually. The earliest written music was unrolled, and it would have one line or no lines, the words and a bunch of little squares around it, and it was up to the priest to interpret it. That meant there were oftentimes many confusions into that. So what he did is he put on vellum 4 lines, one for each finger. And here we have an example of probably 11th century, it could be as old as 12th century music. It is real. It is on vellum. And you can see how beautifully it's written. It's also almost torn here, because vellum got used over and over again. And if you get really close, you can actually see that there are ghosts of letters behind it, because somebody, some monk probably, was told, copy out this motet, and he didn't want to take the time to prepare a fresh piece of vellum, which means you get an animal skin and scrape it and scrape it and scrape it and scrape it until it is pliable and smooth enough to write on. So instead he took an older one they weren't using anymore and scraped it off and added his work. And so here we have this beautiful piece. There's still no time signature. That was open to interpretation. But you see the notes are on there. Then, about the 13th century, they added a fifth line. This, again, is old music from that time period. And again, if you get really close, you can see down here, all over it, actually, you can see the ghost writing, which is called pamphlet. So again, no measure lines, no time signatures, but that was how they did it. Now, Guido suggested that on these lines, you write a C, a G, and an F, so that they would know which notes belonged on those lines. Those became our modern clef signs. So this was kind of an example in both cases of early recycling and how they designed things so that things would work. So once again, as time went on, they added time signatures. They added note values. There's no note values here, except these are drawn like this, so you'll hold them longer. Well, how long do you hold them? Who knows? Okay. Oops. So as things progressed and things changed, now in the 21st century, we still use all the Italian direction signs, but it's available for everyone, no matter what country you're in, to read. A Russian student will see largo and know to play slow. An Italian student will see piano and know to play soft. A Chinese student will see vivace and know to play happily. So that is kind of quickly and in a nutshell why music developed the way it did. Thank you and have a blessed day.